Greetings, this is Rob Seaman, and you're listening to Whole Earth Radio. Today is Season 2, Episode 10, and it's very exciting because I have a guest who is actually the first guest that I had on this podcast back in 2020, the very beginning of the COVID-19 era. So glad that's behind us. I had my next guest on as my very first guest, and he is a legend in natural products. He has been an innovator from day one, working with some huge companies like Nordic Naturals, North American Herb and Spice, CV Sciences. They call him the godfather of CBD. Stuart has really made a lot of important innovations in our industry and caused a lot of people to make a lot of money based on what he has led us all to in terms of our nutrition. But Stuart's not focused on money. He's with a new company, but Stuart's focus is on human health and making us all better. So Stuart, thank you so much for being back on Whole Earth Radio to tell us about the big fat story.
Rob, it's such a pleasure to be back on your show. I love you so much and love your show. And I'm so excited that we get to tell the big fat story. And it's a story that focuses around testing instead of guessing. And I call it the big fat story because, let's face it, we have three macronutrients: protein, carbohydrate, and fat. We know we probably should have more protein. We all know we probably need more complex carbohydrates and fewer refined sugars and processed foods. But when it comes to fat, that's where we often get confused. I think we've all agreed that trans fatty acids were bad, so we got those out of the diet. Now we need to focus on the balance between omega-6 and omega-3, because those are the essential fatty acids. And what that means is our bodies don't make them. We need to get them from our diet. Now, they're both important. They're both essential. It's the balance of omega-6 to omega-3 that is important. And the reason I call it the big fat story is if you're not testing, you're guessing. And there is a multi-billion-dollar industry in the omega-3 market. Is worth $65 billion globally today. It's projected to reach $200 billion by the year 2050. However, 97%, listen to this statistic, 97% of people globally are out of balance relative to these two essential fats. So that's why we call it the big fat story. And after that, we're going to address which factors are the actors. What is the difference between eating fish on the one hand and eating refined, purified fish oil on the other? Which factors are the actors? Why does fish seem to demonstrate incredible health benefits where the medical literature finds omega-3 supplements wanting? And then finally, we're going to discuss the tissue, which is the issue. Your number, my number, our personal omega-6/3 balance score is the most important longevity number that we don't know. We know the size of our shoes. Most of us know our blood pressure. Most of us know our blood cholesterol and our blood sugar, but very few people know their omega-6/3 balance score. And finally, that's why my crusade now, I hope, Rob, for the rest of my career, is to get this message to billions of people globally that if you start testing and stop guessing, you'll get the benefit of eating fish. And we maybe have unlocked the mystery between the difference of fish and fish oil. And that's what I wanted to cover with you today.
That's really fantastic. And I think when you talk about testing, you say, stop guessing and start testing. And, you know, your new mission here is with the company Zenzino. And, you know, a big part of Zenzino's mission is not just making a better oil, but in also showing results from supplementing with that oil. And I think that's a really key point. It's something that you started back in the day. You were one of the first innovators I ever heard talk about omega-3 blood spot testing back in the day. You led testing innovators like Doug Bibas to be on Steve Langford's Health Quest podcast. I remember that one. And, suddenly people were aware that they could do omega-3 testing because of you. And you're talking about, look, supplementing is one thing, just doing it on faith is a little bit short-sighted. And so if you're testing, you're not just doing something proactive about your health, you're also measuring the outcomes, measuring the results of your supplementation. And I think a lot of detractors of our industry, a lot of detractors of nutritional supplements, people will use cliches like expensive urine, which I hate. It's such a ridiculous cliche, right? That we're just urinating out whatever supplements we buy. And we know that's not true. But however, it is very important to look at what type of supplements we're taking. So maybe we could just dive right in there, because I think a lot of people who've heard you talk about omega-3 and other nutrients over the years are wondering what is different now, what is different in the product that you are interested in and advocating for now. So you made an interesting statement that eating fatty fish has different effects in the body than taking refined fish oil, just the oil without some of the factors that may be actors. So tell us about that.
Well, Rob, thank you for getting it immediately. I just want to address that you were one of the first people to take one of those blood spot tests with me back almost 20 years ago. And it does take about 20 years for something to start to hit the mainstream. And we handed out those omega-3 blood spot tests to retailers across the entire country. And what I learned was we were educating the people that worked at Whole Foods, the independent health food stores, GNC, Vitamin Shop. However, that message was not getting directly to the consumer, where that's who really needs to hear this message. And so to be back in this space, working with a company whose mission is to be the largest personalized nutrition company in the world based on test-based nutrition, I think, Rob, we're going to look back in 10 years and we're going to laugh. I'll laugh at myself of all of the dietary supplements that I took that I didn't know if they were working. I mean, we're not just testing omega-3, and we're going to focus on that today, but Zenzino is also testing your at-home vitamin D levels, your long-term A1C blood sugar levels. We're working on a leaky gut test, a leaky brain test. And I just came back from Norway and visited the Vitas laboratories that Zenzino works with, and they've tested 1.3 million people, 1.3 million blood spot tests. And Dr. Thomas Gunderson, who's the founder for 30 years, the CEO and the chief science officer, showed me that at their laboratory, Vitas Laboratories, they're working with Bristol Myers Squibb, with DSM, with Zoe, with King's College. I mean, some of the biggest, Mayo Clinic, some of the biggest institutions in the world. And he looked at me and he said, "Do you read scientific papers?" Now, I actually do, but we know the answer. Most people don't. And he said that he was working with Zenzino because they were turning these scientific findings into action and actually able to reach out to people. In any case, listen to this statistic. 97% of people that take their at-home omega-3 blood spot test, 97% fail.
Wow. So when you say they fail, I just want to clarify, we're talking about they fail in terms of the analysis of their blood and the ratio of omega-6 to omega-3, and also some other factor. Arachidonic acid is one of those that's measured.
Yes, they measure 11 different fatty acids. So it's the most comprehensive omega-3 blood spot test I have ever seen. And when they say fail, what we want is a balance between omega-6 and omega-3. We want them in balance. Most Americans have 25 parts omega-6 and 1 part omega-3. What does that mean to the average person? Omega-6s produce the largely pro-inflammatory signals. Omega-3s produce the signals that help to resolve the inflammation, which means if you have a 25-to-1 ratio, like most Americans do, the tissue, which is the issue, is deficient in the critical omega-3s needed to resolve inflammation. So that's why the balance is so important. So when he told me that of the 1.3 million blood spot tests, 97% of the people fail, meaning they have higher than 3-to-1. That would be 3 parts omega-6, 1 part omega-3. Ideally, we might want to be closer to 2-to-1. Some even argue 1-to-1. In any case, the average American is 25-to-1. So when he told us 97% of the tests that come into Vitas laboratory fail, however, 100% of the people that stay on the balanced oil, which is dosed by weight, we'll talk about that later. That was another thing that I was flummoxed. Can't even spit the word out. I was confused why the label says take 2 fish oil pills and call me in the morning. See, if you're bigger and you take 2, you might be underdosing. And if you're little and you're taking 2, you might be overdosing. So at Zinzino, with their balanced oil, the fish oil is recommended based on your body weight. So this is the statistic that just blew my mind. 97% of the people that take this at-home blood spot test, it's easy, simple to use, it's inexpensive. You don't need a vein puncture or an appointment to the doctor's office. To give you the most important number that you don't know, your omega-3/6 balance score, he said 97% fail. 100% of the people that take the second test. Now, they only take the second test after 120 days. And they took the oil every day for 120 days. Compliance is everything in nutrition. Compliance is everything in nutrition. He said 100% of the people that take the second test improve dramatically or pass. 97% fail, 100% that stay on the oil for 120 days. So if you're not going to stay on the balanced oil for 120 days, stop the podcast right now. Don't listen. Go somewhere else. Eat sardines and anchovies. You probably don't need omega-3. Okay? So that's why this was such a big, fat story and something that was so exciting to me. And I couldn't wait to share with your audience because myself personally, Rob, when I first took that test with you 20 years ago, my score was incredible. I was eating sardines every day. I was eating a lot of cold water, oily fish, and I got an incredible omega-3 score. I took the test recently, and my results were 13-to-1. 13 parts omega-6, 1 part omega-3. And so that's the big reason why I call it the big fat story, is that your cells were made of 37 trillion cells. We make 800 billion a day, some people say. And the cells are made of whatever fat you eat. So if you are imbalanced, you have too many omega-6s and not enough omega-3s, 3 things happen. Cellular to cellular communication begins to be impeded. What does that mean? What happens when you lose communication with your partner, with your family, with your children? I've worked in big companies where there's poor communication, everything falls apart. Number 2, if you don't have enough omega-3, too many omega-6s, and too many saturated fats in your cell membrane, the nutrients that you're taking from the food you eat or the supplements you take do not as effectively get into the cell. And finally, waste products can't get out. So imagine a person where they've lost the ability to communicate, they're starving to death, and they're constipated. That is the average person walking around with a 25-to-1 omega-6 to omega-3 ratio. And that's why for the rest of my life, I will say this with authority. This is the most important mission I've ever been on. This is the biggest breakthrough in omega-3s in 25 years, and is something that everyone needs to know their omega-3 number. It's more important than any number, and you don't even know what it is, most of us.
Well, and I want to talk about, there's so many aspects to this that are fascinating, and I want to get to, some of the big names that you've actually brought with you on this Zenzino journey. Some of the biggest names from when we were both back in the Nordic Naturals era, and some really important and impressive doctors, folks with very impressive credentials, and we'll get to those names because I just thought about something you told me. Someone had asked you what happened to Omega Man when you talked to your 13-to-1 results there, and you can get into that, but I want to stay on the BalanceOil for just a minute because as you sort of alluded to, people have short attention spans these days. They may tune us off to go to another bat channel, but while we've got their attention, if someone is asking, okay, I've been taking fish oil, Stuart, you told me to take fish oil 20 years ago, I've been doing that, what makes BalanceOil different? How would you give the best synopsis of what really sets BalanceOil apart from other omega-3?
Balanced oil is oily fish in liquid form, combined with the highest polyphenolic rich olive oil. So immature olives that have the highest level of these powerful polyphenol antioxidants that protect the fatty acids are blended together. I call it a Mediterranean diet in a bottle. The difference between purified fish oil and balanced oil is not fish oil. It's oily fish in liquid form combined with the highest polyphenolic rich olive oil. I call it a Mediterranean diet in a bottle. Let's dive deeper. When you make purified, refined, molecularly distilled fish oil, you strip away all of the polyphenols, the antioxidants. Where do they come from? The small fish that we use to make fish oil eat plankton that eat algae. The algae contain the fatty acids and the polyphenols together. When you filter fish oil to remove PCBs, dioxins, fire retardants, and microplastics, I had no idea, Rob, that you strip away the polyphenols that protect the fatty acids, the polyphenols that act like cofactors and chaperones. I call them chaperones because they take the fatty acids to the dance, like a chaperone is supposed to. They take the fatty acids into the cell. Why? The tissue is the issue. Balanced oil has far greater secondary bioavailability. Balanced oil has the polyphenols that are also antioxidants that scavenge free radicals that are also prebiotics along with the fatty acids to feed the gut, so that the balanced oil doesn't cause you to use your stores of something like glutathione. Balanced oil is like eating fish. It's like eating food in a bottle. Now, this was new to me 8 weeks ago. So what I needed to do was speak to the chief science officer at Zenzino. I needed to meet the founder of the company, Oren Sali. I just came back from Norway. I needed to go to the contract manufacturing facility. I needed to go to Vitas Laboratories. And then I needed to try to sell this story to some of the top omega-3 scientists in the world. And as a result of being won over by the data, by the medical hypothesis and this new angle, some of the top omega-3 scientists have joined my Zenzino team to bring this message to the entire world.
Now, can we say some of those names? Because I know, there are some folks that have really impressive credentials that you've worked with over the years that obviously, as you say, you're bringing them over to your Zenzino team.
Yes, I don't think there's any problem with us sharing some of these people. I think it's important that the listeners know that this is not a sales pitch. This is the most important breakthrough in personalized nutrition in the omega-3 space in 25. Needed to have very serious people join the team. So Dr. Michael Garko, if you remember Dr. Garko from his show,
Yep.
Let's Talk Nutrition, nationally syndicated, globally streamed for 15 years, broadcasted 2 hours a day, 5 days a week. And that was in conjunction with the vitamin discount centers down in Florida. But it was a nationally syndicated show. And I had the good fortune of being a guest on Dr. Garko's show for 15 years. I think I was the most frequent guest on his show. And what was interesting about Dr. Garko is he had to hear and did hear every pitch from every company that was a sponsor on his show. So winning him over first was critical. And so he was the first person to join my Zenzino team April 22nd. It was his 80th birthday. And if you don't know Dr. Michael Garko, he became 80 and he looks like he's 40, right?
Oh, yeah.
He's been in the gym his whole life, natural, right? And,
He's
Vic, you know him, right?
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, Dr. Garko is really a legend in our industry. And as you're saying, I mean, when you just said he's 80, I can't believe it. I've seen him recently, and we should all be so productive and full of life at 80. We should all be so blessed.
And he actually has multiple degrees, but he went back to school recently to become a nutritionist. So he's seeing patients, not as a way to make money. I mean, he's very successful. He's retired. He doesn't need to work. He's got all of his needs met, but he's got a mission like you have, like I have, to ease the suffering of others. And he understands that education and empowering people with this message is critical. So Dr. Michael Garko, you can look him up on Instagram. You can see him online and watch him in the gym. He's constantly working out. He's been a huge inspiration to me and a mentor to me in my life. And then soon after he joined, Vicky Southard from the PR group. Now, Vicky is a name that many people might not know, but she booked all the radio shows for me pretty much over my career. And I've done 7,500 radio interviews, and Vicky has booked all of the important people in the natural product channel, in industry, in lipids, and in other areas. And so she's heard it all.
Now, side note, you started, really doing health radio back when you were with North American Urban Spice. Do you and Vicky go that far back, or is?
Yes, we do. I go all the way back with her, with Dr. Ingram and North American Urban Spice. When Dr. Ingram was busy and he said, I'm too busy to do this show, kid, you do the show. And I did the show, and I'm all nervous on air, and I listen to him, and I like to be a student, and I allow myself to be mentored and coached by people. But when Vicky and I worked together at Nordic Naturals, at one point I was doing 70 radio shows a month. And so it's not about me, it's about the people that are really serious in the industry that listened to this story that I'm telling, this big fat story, why Zenzino is different, why the test is different, why the balanced oil is different, and what kind of an impact it can have on society. So they were the first two people to join the team. And then right after that, Stephen Schmitz, who you might not know, Dr. Schmitz, MD, MPH, but he's the founder of Supplement Safety Solutions.
Wow.
Supplement Safety Solutions. Have you heard of them, Rob?
Yeah. That's another big name.
Yeah, it's the biggest adverse event reporting, there are two of them, but one of the two largest adverse event reporting companies in the dietary supplement industry. So Dr. Steve, who just retired from Big Pharma, he was working with pharmacovigilance, so drug safety. started his business called Supplement Safety Solutions with our dear late great friend Hector Lopez, MD. Dr. Lopez and Steve Schmitz are dear friends. We're dear friends and business partners in this venture. And what I love about Dr. Steve is he's taken more calls, his company, more adverse event report calls, which are very few, by the way, for dietary supplements, that he's done more adverse event reporting in the natural product industry than any one person alive. So he gets to hear every story from every company, and he's looking at the safety of the product and then the efficacy, because he's a drug safety guy, a supplement safety guy. So Dr. Steve Schmitz joined the team. Soon after that, Colonel Dr. Michael Lewis, MD, MPH, MBA, and some other alphabet soup after his name, West Point grad, Army Ranger, who wrote When Brains Collide. And he's the founder of the Brain Health Education Research Institute and is an expert in traumatic brain injury and omega-3. He came up with the omega-3 protocol for traumatic brain injury and for concussions. And so I showed all of this information to Dr. Lewis. He affectionately likes to be called Mike. Hello, Mike. And he took a very close look with me at this balanced oil. He knew all about the blood spot testing. I mean, he's one of the preeminent experts in the world. But he looked at the balance oil and he was just as intrigued as I was. Is balance oil more like eating fish? Has refined fish oil failed in some of the Cochrane reviews, some of the clinical trials, because fish oil is not the same as eating oily fish in liquid form? Are these polyphenols important because they cross the blood-brain barrier? And he has become so excited about this because he was a public health official. And if you remember, Mike Lewis published a paper almost over 10 years ago now about military suicide and the omega-3 score. Do you remember that, Rob?
Yeah, absolutely.
So just as a quick aside, Dr. Lewis and his colleague, Captain Joe Hiblin from the National Institutes of Health from the Department of Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism, tested soldiers that had committed suicide, and they found they had a 25-to-1 omega-6 to omega-3 ratio. So that was a correlation that if you have that much omega-6 and omega-3 deficiency, that isn't good for your brain. And it isn't good for your emotions and for your mental health, in addition to the toll of inflammation that can't be resolved. So Mike Lewis joined the team, and there are many, many others as well.
Yeah, and wow, just that roster right there is very impressive. And I know there are many others, doctors and others you've worked with over the years. All of them, from what I've heard, have been really anxious to get on board and to get on the Zinzino team, as it were. And I just wanted to say something, about what you said about, Mike Lewis's study with the suicide rates in soldiers. And I was just talking to someone, a mother, the other day about postpartum depression. And, she was talking about what a rough time she had after her pregnancy and that postpartum depression that she experienced. And I said, just fun fact, did you know that in the third trimester, right before that baby is released into the world, as it were, that the mother's body dumps like all the omega-3 in her body into that baby to equip that baby for, cellular, neurological development, all of these important things. You're sending your baby off into the world with this amazing amount of omega-3 that, just by the miracle of nature and birth and motherhood, this is what happens. What's the side effect? What's the downside? Is that mainstream medicine, by and large, does not recognize the need for omega-3 supplementation, testing, any of that in new mothers. So how many, just like many soldiers may be experiencing depression and, God forbid, suicide due to imbalances in these essential fatty acids, every mother in the world has the potential to experience these same terrible symptoms because we don't know what we don't know.
No, you make such an excellent point. It's so true. Mom donates all of her omega-3 to build this precious new life, and it can often leave her in the lurch. Susan Carlson, PhD, has done some incredible work in this area. There are many others as well. And they've even connected this omega-3 sufficiency relative to deficiency to a statistically significant increase in IQ. So this is no joke. The brain is a supercomputer made out of fat. It's made of the fat that we eat. And if you are deficient in omega-3 and you have too much omega-6 in the brain, then there's a serious imbalance in your brain. What you said was very interesting about postpartum depression, because part of what got me so excited about BalanceOil and Zenzino was the difference between the epidemiological science, the observations of cultures eating fish, and the lackluster results of intervention trials using 2 or 4 fish oil pills. And the second author on Mike Lewis's paper, Captain Joe Hibbelin, he has published 500 papers. He's a psychiatrist. He's the preeminent expert on omega-3 and brain health and mental health. And I remember years ago, he showed me a paper, and anybody can find this, that it's a correlation, not causation, that in Japan, and it's changed now, but they used to eat a lot of fish in Japan. Now, many younger Japanese are eating more of a Western diet, and they're eating what we call the SAD, standard American diet, that has more omega-6 and less omega-3. But let's just go with their parents and grandparents. Ate 150 pounds on average, 150 pounds of seafood per person per year. Think about that, Rob. Now, that's not the only reason why they're healthy in Japan. I'm not a reductionist, and neither are you. But the correlation between 150 pounds of seafood per person per year and lower rates of postpartum depression, to your point.
Yeah, and I love that you're relating this to the whole food approach that Zenzino is taking, using a more dynamic type of supplement. And I wanted to relate that to some of the specific we just sit here and we geek out on nutrition, all the time. And when you told me that this product was rich in tyrosol, hydroxytyrosol, one of the things I had been amazed about was that, found this out a number of years ago, there were a couple of papers that were published that showed, so we're told that human beings cannot make their own vitamin C, right? That is an essential nutrient that we all must supplement with. And, and I do believe in supplementing with vitamin C, even if we can turn on our genes to make some vitamin C, we certainly, in this world, we need to look at supplementing with whole foods, vitamin C rich foods, all of that. But specifically, tyrosol can turn on, according to these published studies, not according to me, our ability. So it's not just humans and guinea pigs don't make vitamin C. It's that if we have perhaps the right nutritional factors, our body can make its own vitamin C. And that's what those studies indicated, that these polyphenols from young olives, as you're saying, these exact same polyphenols may be so antioxidant that they actually turn on our body's ability to make essential nutrient antioxidants that we were told we'd never be able to make.
When you shared that with me, because you are so smart, Rob, I know you are very humble as a man, but I tell you, when you shared that with me, I had such an aha moment, because I had never studied these polyphenols that come from olives, and I didn't understand that algae has polyphenols and fatty acids married together, and that these polyphenols in the algae protect the fatty acids, and that if you didn't have the polyphenols with the fatty acids, the algae would just explode. And so I've also since learned that these polyphenols in the olive oil, in the balanced oil, there are papers online that show that these polyphenols break up microcalcifications in your arteries. They cross the blood-brain barrier. Mike Lewis sent me a paper using these polyphenols from the olive oil for stroke models. And he's interested in using it for his traumatic brain injury patients because he believes that it will be more effective to cross the blood-brain barrier, because it does, to get the fatty acids into the brain where you need it the most. I've also recently been aware of a paper in JAMA, which, Rob, if we can put some papers in the show notes,
Yeah,
if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
I'd like to include the military suicide paper, but then the recent reporting on olive oil. You saw the recent reporting on olive oil that went viral a couple of weeks ago. We talked about that paper. You saw the reporting on that?
Yeah. Yeah. That's,
okay, so they look really quick. Go ahead.
No, I just said it's fascinating.
I couldn't believe this when I read it. It's an observational study. It's not an interventional study, but they looked at, over 90,000 people taking olive oil 7 grams a day for 28 years. This is an interesting correlation. And they correlated that to a 28% reduction in dementia death. And so, a lot of nutrition is very difficult because our job is to keep healthy people healthy. We're not here to practice medicine. Our product doesn't treat, cure, mitigate, ameliorate a disease or a disease symptom. What the balanced oil and the test does is it empowers you to know the most important number that you don't know, knowing that if you're made of 37 trillion cells, you're only as healthy as your cells. If you have too many omega-6s, too many saturated fats, and not enough omega-3, the cells don't have optimal communication, nutrients can't get in, waste products can't get out. Now, we need inflammation. Inflammation is critical. However, we also need the substrate in the tissue, which is the issue, to resolve the inflammation. If you get a paper cut and you don't have inflammation, we bleed to death. If you don't have enough omega-3 in your tissues and you have a paper cut, it may take a lot longer for that wound to heal. So that's why, Rob, I think correcting the omega-3 deficiency, balancing omega-6 and omega-3 with food, and balanced oil is like oily fish in liquid form. I call it a Mediterranean diet in a bottle, may be the most important nutritional intervention that we have control over. And I'd like to know your thoughts about that. I know how important vitamin D is. I'm a fiber freak. I know you love fiber too. And these are all things we should be doing. But getting this balance between omega-6 and omega-3 is practical, important, and actionable. Where do you stand on this?
Well, I think, one of the trends I've seen in the health food store world over the years is more and more people saying, I'm trying to get more of my nutrients from food, because you and I probably both started off the century, taking as many tablets and capsules as anyone, the antioxidants and the this and the that and the and it's not like I don't take supplements. I do, but today I am choosier about which ones I take because I don't want to take things that I don't need. And I see more and more people along that same line of thinking. When people say, I want to get more of it from food, that's a great idea. But if you don't know how you're doing, if you don't have a way to measure that, in other words, I guess what I'm saying is they should stop guessing and start testing. If you think that you're going to get your omega-3 from food, all very well and good. But I think what you're describing with Zenzino is, and this has also been an evolution in things, a more food-like supplementation, a supplementation that addresses, checks all the boxes that the food does, because there's no substitute for food. Clearly, there's no substitute for fruits and vegetables. There may be no substitute for eating sometimes oily fish, but supplementation is meant to fill in the gaps. And so how are you doing with all of that, with your diet and your supplementation? Measuring that, testing that, I think is, like you said, it is probably one of the greatest innovations that Zenzino and yourself are bringing to the table for a long time now. Because, when people don't know what the results are of their supplementation, they also tend to sometimes go away from that because, I don't know if I felt any better. I don't know if I'm doing any better. I'm buying this thing. I'm taking it. Is it working? It's really important that people have measurable results from what they're doing. Because if we don't have any kind of feedback, we don't have any kind of measurement or markers, objective results, we're sort of just flying blind. And maybe we might as well just be eating at McDonald's because we might convince ourselves that, maybe it doesn't matter. And you and I both know, because we have looked at enough of the science and anecdotal stuff. People like Dr. Garko don't eat at McDonald's. I'm sorry. So yes, we need to measure what we're doing. So testing is important, but really these key principles of eating good food and eating food that contains these specific nutrients, that isn't just protein, carbohydrate, and fat, but is also rich in polyphenols, is rich in essential fatty acids, these specific nutrients that will make our cells healthier, make our bodies healthier, make us live longer, more productive lives, God willing.
Because you said something so important there. I've been taught by Dr. Garko that our goal is to be healthy enough to expire quickly, meaning let's compress morbidity and mortality. What does that mean? Look at the Queen of England. She was signing documents a couple of days before she passed away. To die quickly, you have to be very, very healthy. And I often get a kick, Rob, when people say, the standard American diet and our stress is killing us. Okay, fair enough. Mike Lewis says that stress is chemotherapy, but why are there going to be 4 times as many people living to 100 in the next 20 years? So the biggest fear I think most people have now is outliving their money. And if you're going to outlive your money, you probably want cellular balance and optimal cellular communication, nutrient absorption, and waste product excretion, so that you can have the vitality, the vigor, and the energy to get a part-time job, either bagging groceries or driving Uber. Maybe you can just join our Zenzino team with us and share this message with the rest of the world as a little side income. But I want to always bring up that paradox that we are all living longer. However, many of us get sick young, and we live many, many years without well span, right? There's health span is longer, well span is shorter. So that's the reason I'm so serious about correcting this omega-3 deficiency and balancing. I heard an interesting thing from one of the seminal founders of this balanced concept. His name is Ola Edie. And he pointed out that that if you take the balanced oil as it's recommended by weight, right? So it's a certain amount of milliliters based on weight, which I've never seen that before on the label of a fish oil. He says if you take it every day, and again, compliance is everything with nutrition, that what you eat isn't nearly as important. Now, I know not everybody wants to hear that message, right? But after a lifetime in this industry, Rob, I can't tell you, let me choose my words carefully here, how ineffectual I have been at helping anybody change what they eat for any length of time. Is that fair enough?
Yeah, I think that's fair. It's unrealistic for anyone to set themselves up to eat the perfect diet or to set out to eat perfectly. There's quality of life, and I try to choose what I eat carefully, and I've been blessed that I don't have like a huge sweet tooth, and I stopped drinking soda pop, 30 plus years ago when I went vegan, and all these things you and I have been through that have caused us to get off the standard American diet, and a lot of things that people take for granted that really can drag you down. Just the soda pop and just how destructive that is. Just drinking water instead of Coca-Cola. How much of a we'd love to see some studies on that, because I'm sure making those kind of changes, even more so than getting the exact balance in your diet of carbs to protein. And there's no one size fits all.
I'm so happy that you said that, because if you look at the blue zones, and we're working with some longevity experts that are also on our team that are, very, very disciplined with their diet. I mean, they've got the most self-control of any couple I've ever met in my life, and they look healthy and they're brilliant and they're vibrant. But that's rare. That's the exception rather than the rule. And when you look at these blue zones, sometimes people drink, and sometimes people don't, and sometimes people are out working outside all the times. And like if you watch the Blue Zone special that was on Netflix, I realized they pointed out in Japan, people are sitting on the ground all the time, at least the older people, and then they stand up, right? So they've got a lot of core strength. So there are so many variables. Biology is so complicated and can never be simplified. And that's why I love this idea when Ola Edie, who is one of the founders of this balanced concept, said, if you take the balanced oil as directed and you test and you don't guess, then the rest of what you eat isn't as important. In fact, I would say that by me failing my test so miserably, that it motivated me to keep taking my balanced oil. And before I failed my test, I had been following Dr. Greger, who I love, nutritionfacts.org, and I'd been trying to go vegan again, and I was eating these flax meal muffins all the time, and tempeh and tofu, and so much kale that my jaw hurts. And I'm powerlifting in the gym, and I'm in the sauna. I'm doing my Wim Hof breathing. I thought, maybe I over-exaggerated the sardine and anchovy thing. And your body can turn green leafy vegetables into EPA and DHA, right? Your body can turn seeds and nuts into GLA and arachidonic acid. Maybe I could just get it all, to your point, Rob, from food. Well, I took my test and I failed so miserably, and this is just an N of 1. I've been on the balanced oil now for about a month, and I feel better. And I'm not going to say that's going to happen to everybody, but this is one of the things that got me. Our chief science officer, Paul Clayton from Edinburgh, medical pharmacologist, then trained in Oxford with Michael Crawford, who wrote The Driving Force, one of my favorite books. He won Brain of the Year, right? You remember that book, right?
Oh my gosh, yeah, Michael Crawford. Isn't he Sir Michael Crawford?
He is Sir Michael Crawford, and he's just one of the greatest of all time. And so I had Paul Clayton, our chief science officer, say, Stuart, I've seen people that get a high omega-3 index. That's the average score. Most tests only test that. But the balance score, that's the balance between omega-6 and omega-3, between arachidonic acid and EPA. That's the number. He said, I've seen people that have a high omega-3 index. They get on the balanced oil for 120 days. Their omega-3 index goes up a little bit. That's good. But their omega-6s go down and their omega-3s go up because the omega-3s push the omega-6s out of the way. The olive oil in the balanced oil push some of the omega-6s out of the way because the tissue is the issue, and the cells will self-assemble based on everything that you eat. Number 2, they're the fats you make. And number 3, genetics. So because of those rate-limiting factors, if you are not testing, you are guessing. And so I thought to myself, can I find anything in the world that is a bigger public health initiative than joining a company like Zenzino with a volunteer army. Rob, you own health food stores, right? You own a store right now?
I do not, but I used to be owner of a health food store in Lake County, Illinois.
Okay, I remember. I just got that confused. But let's say
Yeah,
that you actively had a store right now,
right.
and you put the blood spot test and the balanced oil on the shelf, and customers would just walk by, and there's a for sale sign, right? It's $109 for the test and the oil. The test is normally $170, but we'll give you a special at Rob's Health Food Store, right? You get the test for $109, and I'll give you a bottle of oil for free. And then you come back and you get on subscription, pretend it's subscription in a health food store, and it's $42 a month for 4 months. And on the 5th month, they come back in, they give you another test for free. Rob, if you actually had that sitting on the shelf without anybody there to explain it like you or I, do you think that test and that oil would sell itself without any explanation?
Well, that is the biggest challenge, I think, in our industry is nothing, no matter how good it is self-explanatory anymore. It's a
I
real,
totally agree.
there's a huge information gap. People are confused, and that's part of what we're trying to do here today, I got to say, I want to have you back on, and hopefully, I know that Zenzino makes a lot of other products besides balanced oil, and as you alluded to, is coming out with, we got to have you back on at some point to talk about that leaky brain test, because
And leaky gut and leaky brain, because that's another big issue where we have products to help with the gut and get the gram negative, gram positive balance correct in the gut so that we can really get the most out of our nutrition. So I know the time just flew by. I just want to share one more thing. If you do pass the test, if you're lucky enough to pass the test, like Dr. Garko did, he got a 3-to-1. Then Zenzino gives you your money back and you get to keep the oil for free. Now, I can't imagine going to a doctor's office, taking a blood test, passing a test, and asking for a refund. They're not going to do it. So these are some of the reasons why I was so excited to join the team. Others have joined the team. Dr. Carrie Marshall, ND, remember her? She was my boss at Nordic Naturals. Scott Minton, who was the former chief science officer of Nordic Naturals, he joined the team. I mean, it's such an impressive roster. So if you want to learn more about this, we'll put some information, right, Rob, in the show notes so that we can help people learn more about what we're doing here.
There'll be some good links. I'll put some links to those studies, but I really just wanted to thank you so much for being on, Stuart. I know you're super busy, but everyone who has followed your career is always fascinated by what you do, because you've been such an innovator, as I said, and people ask me all the time, what's Stuart up to, and I, they don't want to know about me. They want to know about you, and so I'm so happy to be able to put this out there where you're, and it's been such a great discussion, but I think it's just really fascinating, all the information that you put out there. And like I say, I hope that we can, do a part 2 before very long and get some more of this other innovative information out there.
Thank you, Rob. It's such a pleasure.
Thanks, Stu. See you soon.